Hey folks, here we are again for another one of our Transformation Tuesdays episode. And today we have the debonair and suave founder of Great House Caterers, Theo Smith. Now, Theo is not just a client and a great client of ours. Theo is also a wonderful person and a great friend. So I really want to welcome you, Theo. It is an absolute
Thank you.
pleasure having you with us this evening. And so, folks, we have gone through different industries. There is one that has taken a beating and has had to pivot and pivot throughout this pandemic. So, I really want Theo to share with you, as a small business owner, his experiences. So, Theo, tell us about your business. Tell us how Great House Caterers started. Who is it? What is Great House Caterers?
All right. So, Great House Caterers was this idea I had 10 years ago, actually. And the idea was when I went to the catering conference in Las Vegas, I had an idea that I wanted to work in the catering industry, and I went overseas, went to this catering conference. And I realized at the time the catering industry locally definitely was, if you want to say, a little bit backwards compared to what was happening globally. So I decided that I wanted to start Great House Caterers with the aim of providing customers catering outside of the status quo, having the option to go with flexible menu items, having the option to have live and interactive food stations. Now, it has evolved over the years. We started just in catering. Now we do catering. We have our open bar service, and then we have dinnerware rentals. The idea is to provide our clients with a hassle-free catering experience, making sure that once food is involved, we can cover all of that for them. So
Wow,
that is
that's
what we do.
awesome. So, who is your ideal customer?
So our ideal customers actually fall in three different categories. Because we have weddings, corporate, and social events, we have one ideal customer basically for each of the segments. Of course, for weddings, it's a combination of wedding planners as well as engaged couples. Oftentimes destination weddings, so these are Jamaicans living in other countries, coming back to Jamaica to go and celebrate their nuptials. For the corporate side, of course, these are marketing managers, also HR managers having workshops, seminars, etc., for their corporate events, product launches, and our social clients, which is really who we're focusing on right now, especially during the pandemic, is persons at home wanting to entertain, wanting to feed their families, celebrating birthdays, etc. So that's their three main target clients.
So, folks, as you listen to Theo, you hear him, you didn't hear just one target market, because that's a myth. You have chunks and segments based on the products or services that you offer. And Theo has been an action coach client of ours for quite a while, so he knows that, listen, for each of the products or services, I need to be very specific about who I'm targeting in order to be able to reach them successfully. Now, COVID impacted everybody, Theo. So tell us your journey now with the experience of COVID, which continues, the transitions and the pivoting and everything else you have had to be doing.
So it definitely has been a long road, a lot of lessons learned, a lot of successes as well. So definitely in the early days, we kind of just wanted to see what was going to happen. It was one of those situations where we assumed maybe a month from now things will be back to normal, and we sat, we looked. I remember when you came up with one of the first workshops helping entrepreneurs. I mean, that was when I really started to look at it and say, okay, if this goes longer, what is going to happen? So, of course, the very week it happened, we had like about 5 events canceled because everyone is like, okay, we don't know. Well, actually, I should say most of them were postponed and some canceled, and eventually they all canceled. But no one knew what was going to happen. So that was our first, we'd say, blow. Right after that, we realized that, okay, orders weren't coming in. We essentially went to a point of having around 95% of sales going down. So that was a huge thing. And that was when really the first thing I had to do was to adjust our overheads. So overheads was, I think, the first 4 to 6 months was really the focus. Controlling the overheads, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't something cut like, okay, this month we just cut something and it's fixed. It took some time. We did a lot of adjustments to our operations. Of course, our team wasn't able to work as much. We tried as much to keep everyone core to the team involved, employed. It wasn't as easy, but it was definitely a long road. Outside of that, we started to focus a little bit more on our social clients. So this is where I mentioned they're the ones that we focus on now. Originally, our main focus was weddings, followed by corporate, and then the social. Now it was a complete opposite. It was social first. Corporate was still next in line, and weddings was just absolutely not happening for us. I think sometime around August, September is when our weddings started to slowly pick back up based on the restrictions. But we started to do a little bit more, which is smaller gatherings. We did something that we call our family dinner specials, which we now serve every weekend. It's on Friday and Sundays. But basically, it's just really serving for families, servings of four, which is definitely not what we were used to. I mean,
You mean
doing
this one here?
Yes, that's our family dinner special. So we did our online ordering, which is also new to us. We definitely had to figure out different ways. And of course, this is not even our first online ordering platforms. We went through different versions, see what was comfortable for us, which one we could streamline a little bit better. So it has been a journey, as I say. I can't stress that more than enough. But yes, so it was a good experience. And I say that in a sense that I've learned a lot. And I am excited to see how else we can pivot. But some lessons learned from it, though, is I do wish that I acted a little bit sooner. I mean, I was nervous. That's just honestly it. I was nervous. I was like, okay, no, we're gonna get through this. Like, give it another month, and we see some improvements. The restrictions aren't going to be as bad, but then the restrictions realize they're getting harder and harder to deal with regards to our smaller events. So definitely, that's one of the lessons learned. I should have acted sooner, but I must say it has helped me now moving forward to look at everything granular. Everything we do, every small cost I look at, it's like, okay, how does this add back to the bigger picture? Because it does add up. When you're running operations and sales are running fine, or at least at a standard that you're accustomed to, it's easy to just not look at certain expenses. Now I have to look at every expense, because if we decide to go down further restrictions, we have to look, okay, no sales coming in. I mean, as I said, we went down to 95% low. We eventually got back up, and we were the highest point we've been last year was around 40%. This year we're as in 40% of previous operations, not in reduction. I think now we're looking at around 65%, which is good. And we're still trying to push that a little bit further, but really focusing on our social clients have been the thing for us. And of course, weddings are slowly coming back in once again.
So, Theo, as I listened to you, I heard a lot about cutting expenses, overheads, understanding what your numbers are. So, tell business owners, how important is it for you to know the numbers in your business, and why?
That is actually a very good point. So, why is you really can't truly understand how something is impacting your business unless you know the numbers behind it. And unfortunately, that was, while I did know most of my numbers, I didn't know all the numbers, and they weren't coming to me as quickly as I wanted. So that's something I've also learned from it. I mean, you really just estimating, and oftentimes in a situation like the pandemic, making the wrong decision based on an estimate really could go in very left, if you want to say the wrong direction. So knowing the numbers is extremely important. Having the numbers when you are ready to make a decision is also an important thing. Knowing it 3 months later is not going to help the situation. That's something I've also adjusted. I mean, looking on financials on a monthly basis, we now start to look on a weekly basis, because a month out, it's already too late. I mean,
So
it's
where
already.
do you get your numbers from, Theo? Is it from, say, an accounting? Is it QuickBooks? Any of those,
So it is
platform?
an accounting software. We use a accounting software called Zoho Books, but I've also been able to just pick out some information from the sales side and just look on certain aspects. And I was like, okay, we need to adjust certain expenses, because this month really is not going to cut it. I can know just 1 week into the month that, okay, I'm a little bit concerned. I am not at that quarter mark to go and cover these expenses. So what do we need to do? Where does the sales need to increase? What kind of sacrifice do I need to make in the business? So that has been helpful. And of course, I realize everything for me personally, at least operating in the business, has become a weekly thing instead of a monthly thing. I can no longer look up my numbers once a month. I can no longer wait for the financials at the end of the month. I have to go in the system and look through. It fits perfectly with the family dinner special because we do update our menu weekly. And now because of that, I'm able to go and reach out to a few clients that I know their favorite dish and say, hey, we have this coming up this week. Or what do you want? What do we have to have on the menu for you to purchase for your family this week? Because we now know that, okay, this week's sales might have hit the target 80%, but we need to go to 120% next week to go and level it back out. So that has been an amazing experience, which I wish at one sense I knew 10 years ago when I started the business. While the pandemic, everyone has the downside of looking at it. I really learned a lot. And I got to put in practice a lot of what I've learned through Action Coach, which I must say I am guilty of. I might learn some of these principles and not put them into practice. And as I say, Action Coach, it is really about the actions behind these numbers. I can't stress that enough.
I love what you're sharing here, Theo, because many people do come into workshops, they learn stuff, and I know you did, and I know you took actions on certain things. But as you said, you had to go from, some people look at their numbers once a year, as you know, Theo. End of year for the tax man. You learned not to do that, so you are looking at yours monthly. But then you maybe weren't zeroing in as much as you should have. But the pandemic forced you now to start saying, I can't just look monthly. I now have to look weekly. I'm now looking daily. I'm looking at every single line. So this is what happens, that when we are in a crisis, we have to do things we wouldn't normally do. So I want you to talk a little bit, Theo, about the mindset you had to have when you recognize, because you said, in the early days, it may go away. It will soon, probably, this pandemic won't last so long. And now here we are, 18 months later, or more than that, it's 19 months later on, and still counting, even with vaccines. And so you recognize now we're in this for the long haul. Okay. So what was the mindset you had to have to make you then start to take the actions? We have this formula, B times do equals have, and you know it.
Yes.
You wanted to have your business. I saw you fight for it through this pandemic. But who did you have to be? Tell me about the mindset you had to have.
So I would say with regards to mindset, two key things. One, that openness and willing to learn. I went through a lot of workshops. I read a lot of books. It was really a huge learning experience outside of the pandemic conditions itself, but just having to go through the various resources and understand and trying to figure out how best to move forward. That's one of the biggest things. And I've been surprisingly consistent in making sure I read a book a month. I make sure I go through all of those, the books, the blogs, anything like that I can find something on to learn. My main focus was finance, and my next focus was also on marketing. So outside of that, it's understanding that you can't just sit and wait to figure out what to do. You have to plan. I think you had a workshop for resilience in the early parts of the pandemic. And I sat down with Coach Arlene, and I remember I started to look at plan A, plan B, plan C. And I must say, I would not have done that normally. I'd have said, all right, let's go with plan A, because plan A will work. It will work. And if it doesn't work, well, I'll sit down and think, what is plan B? No, having to have that plan outlined in advance and know the moment it starts to go not as planned, okay, let's jump on to the next option. And that's really how I have been doing it for the most part. Just knowing that, okay, I am now 50% in this new strategy that I'm in. And I have certain signals that I look for. And if I realize that at 60% it's not going as planned, I was like, all right, let me look up for the backup option. I don't wait for it to end and it didn't work out to then jump and look at a new option. You had to move quickly. As much as we felt like I had the time, well, it's actually two different feelings. It felt like the pandemic was going on forever, which it still does feel that way. But at the same time, everything moved at like 90 miles an hour. I mean, you could just get up on a Monday morning without the week planned, And by the time you look around, it was Friday, and you're like, another week. The goals, weren't met. So planning was very important.
Absolutely. And Thea is one of those people have been coming to our Growth Club planning session. It's a quarterly planning session. We actually have one coming up on September 29th, where we plan for the next 90 days. You heard him say he sat down with Coach Arlene, he looked at plan A or plan B. Folks, if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail.
Exactly.
Right? And so it is so important during this time. One of the things that business owners don't do very well is focus, and we don't sit down and have what we call thinking time. And in that thinking time to strategize and to plan. But then Thea said he had to learn, he has to read as many books. So you learn, which is to get the knowledge in, and then you have to sit and think and plan your strategy and then review. You heard him saying every week you have to look again. What was it? 50%, 60. Let me change. What do I have to adjust? And that's what we have to do. You heard the word proactive. So thank you very much for sharing that, Theo. Absolutely. Yes. Now, Theo, there were some new things you had to learn. What were they?
New things I had to learn. Wow. I think one of the biggest aspects, and I wouldn't say it's a major in the sense of skill set, but I felt like I started my business over. I went from having this full-on team, being able to do so much, and of course, having to reduce my team. I had to get back behind the steering wheel and drive the bus myself. That was an experience, but I have had to learn that all over, because after years of not doing it, learning all those processes and realizing, thankfully, some of the adjustments that could have been made. So that has been a great experience there. Outside of that, I definitely had to accept when I don't know something. That was a big thing also. I realized that, okay, I don't know this and I need help, or I need to go learn it somehow. I wouldn't say I fear math or fear accounting. I never was one of those entrepreneurs who said I hated accounting, but I didn't love it. That's the honest truth. I didn't love it. And I've had to change that. First of all, I've had to accept the fact that I need to stop saying that. And then I also needed to just get involved in it a little bit more. Get involved a little bit more, understand. I mean, outside of the pandemic time, I had to review the business pretty much for the past 3 years. Just understand, all right, what did we do? How did we do things? What do we need to adjust? Having a deep understanding of the historicals, and then figuring out moving forward with the pandemic, not knowing when it will stop, what is the plan? So I wouldn't say learning the accounting principles, but falling in love with it a little bit more, right? Getting that passion behind it. Outside of that, I think those are the main things. There's a lot of things I learned along the way, honestly, but those are the main things.
Theo, I want to talk about this because I observed you going through some iterations of getting online, because this was something that you weren't used to doing, because remember, now your customers couldn't walk in, and then you had to now devise a way to collect the money online and so on. So talk about this journey. And this is a whole new way for you. Yeah. So talk about this. This is one of those big things I saw you.
It's surprising. I don't know how that didn't come to mind at first. I feel like a techie by the time I finished with everything. I knew so much about e-commerce system that I've never approached before. Exactly. I learned about payment gateways. I mean, I got my own level of frustration saying, why is it so hard to do this in Jamaica? Why is it hard to get PayPal payments? Why is it so hard to process a transaction online? No, it has been, I enjoy that, but it has been an experience having to, honestly, everyone is doing sales. So really, when you go online and look at these e-commerce platforms, they all look interesting, they all look exciting, and I jump on. I think I jump on my first platform, and within a month in, I was like, this is too much work. This is too much work. I was like, something just wasn't working for me, and then I had to switch. And I couldn't afford to go and say, all right, I'm going to go and pay a company to go and find the best one out there for me at the time. I didn't want to risk that additional expense. So I went ahead and I learned. I read all I could about e-commerce platforms. I found out as much as I could about local payment gateways, understanding how they connect, looking at how it will affect my business, because that's one thing persons don't realize. You go onto these platforms, but when you get paid from a customer, how long before you actually get it? And that cash flow timeline, understanding with your customer, that was a huge thing for me there. Thankfully, I worked it out. It worked out fine, but it was definitely a lot to learn. And I must say, if anyone has challenge with this, find another entrepreneur who has gone through it. If anyone reach out to me, I'll tell them I have no fears in telling them all that I've gone through, because it is a learning experience, and I am grateful for other entrepreneurs who have shared their experience online, because I couldn't find the resources as readily available. It's easy to find it online if you're in the US, but when you're in Jamaica and trying to understand what's available in either your currency or payment gateways locally, it's a little bit challenging, and that is a constant process. As I mentioned, I think the first month in, I realized I had a problem. I changed the platform 3 months later and went to a next one. And then this is probably the third platform that I've been on, but I'm comfortable with it so far. But now I know so much about e-commerce, integrations and stuff like that. I can easily say, if someone come to me and say, hey, we have a software for you, I have all the questions I can ask. I know immediately what it needs to have for me to even consider it a platform to use. So.
Awesome. And because when I saw this, because I did see you going through different things, and here it is, folks, you just click on your family dinner package and you have everything there, and you scroll through to what you want, whether it's the delight, boy, I'm telling you, I'm getting hungry, or the feast, or whether it is the bill your family dinner package, and then you have all the options you can add and then choose what it is that you want. So, I mean, I know, Theo, I saw you building this out. And so when I said, what did you have to learn? Theo, I knew immediately you had to learn that.
One thing to add to that, coming with the online ordering, I had to have a better understanding of my customers on an individual level. Understand, because of course, putting out a limited menu, you will lose a lot of customers. Customers say, okay, I'm not into the pork and beef, and you only have one chicken option, So understanding what our customers loved was one thing. And I also realized that just discussing with my customers, I realized things that they love about me or my company that I didn't realize before. I had customers who explained that, hey, they come to us at events because we always had some gluten-free option. And I thought, I didn't do that intentionally before. But now I know that every time I have a menu, we have to have some gluten-free options, because there are customers out there looking for us with those gluten-free options. Same thing with our vegan customers. I remember sitting back just listening to discussion from clients explaining being a vegan consumer is not necessarily the best thing when you go to a non-vegan restaurant or catering company. They kind of treat you second hand. They don't give you the best option or the most tastiest option. So I've had to see how best I can accommodate, because they are our clients and they're really a big factor. So yeah.
So, we always say that if you build a site, people just won't come to it. So now that you built the site, what do you do to drive customers to the site to purchase?
So our biggest method currently is email marketing. We've been trying to work on our social media side, but I've been tracking the numbers, and our email marketing is number one. We do post up on WhatsApp, the WhatsApp number that we have up, and we get customers there. But word of mouth, well, first is email marketing. Second is WhatsApp. Third is word of mouth. Surprisingly, social media is fourth in line, but that's something that we're trying to see how best we can adjust it, because I know that there's a bigger potential. I just need to figure out the strategy. So what we're doing currently isn't working as much, and we're trying to pivot that and see how we can get social media in a probably second or third biggest channel for that family dinner special.
Absolutely. One of the things you need to hear him saying is that he knows. How can he know which one is working? Because Theo is doing what we call testing and measuring. So you'll have heard from Paula Sells Jamaica in our episode last week about the book called Instant Advertising. And she kept saying the word testing and measuring. And so What you hear Theo doing is also saying the same thing. He knows which of his strategies is working. Top one is email marketing, right? Second one is word of mouth, which means when people come on, he asks folks, you won't know what works and how to invest your marketing dollars unless you test and measure. So excellent information there, Theo. I want to say I agree with you. Social media, especially Facebook and Instagram, algorithms are changing, their whole approach is changing, and you really do have to keep ahead of that. And folks, I'd recommend that you follow this lady called Mary Smith. She's amazing in the amount of information. Join her Facebook groups. She has some courses to learn what is happening with Facebook. It is changing rapidly, and she's very up to date because she's very close to Facebook as well. As a matter of fact, they use her to help people to understand how to use it as they make the different changes. She doesn't work for them, but they know that she has a big following, and so I recommend that. So Theo, we did the marketing, we did the knowing your numbers, and we spoke about the fact that you have to plan and who did you have to be. There's a question I ask everybody, and this is, what one action made a big difference and how is it working now? One action that you took that made a big difference. One or two,
One.
if you want.
All right. So I would say one action is going through our financials with the overheads and cutting. I honestly, I felt I was hurt going through that, knowing that I saw so many expense line items and saying, I can't cut that. Like, we've been doing this for years. We can't cut this now. And just having to sit down and go through and say, okay, we have to cut. Like, it's either cut or end up going in the red. Well, we're going in red, but going further in the red and, being able to dig ourselves out. It's so hard. It's so hard. I didn't realize that there was emotional attachments to certain expenses. There were emotional attachments to certain expenses in the operation. It's surprising because if you said that to me weeks before, I'd say, no. Like, everything, is as minimal as it can be, but it wasn't. So that was the biggest thing. I mean, I think, for an example, we got some of our utilities down about 35%. And we were months into the pandemic, almost not operating, I should say. And I could not see how it could cut down any further. And I managed to. And now I managed to, and I've been able to keep it despite orders coming in. I'm still shocked at it. And as I said, I wish I had learned some of these strategies or acted on some of these strategies years ago. It would have made a huge difference.
Because you learned them, Theo. But is that, as you rightly said, you didn't act on some of them, So one of the strategies that we have, on our business chassis, under profit margins, is cut expenses by 10%. And so usually what happens is, if everything is okay, people just go along just spending. And until you are in a crunch and you really have to, as you did, look line by line, you don't realize just how much we're doing that we don't need to be doing, or how much we're not focusing on how we're spending every single dollar. Even our inventory, how we use it. I always say to everybody, look in the storeroom, look on the shop floor, look every single thing you inside there. You have your raw materials, you have the tins, you have the meat. Just say to everybody, look on those things and replace them with a water cash. Remember I always say that?
You said something years ago that inventory on the shelf was cash on the shelf. I remember that. I went in and I looked in and I was like, look at these things that haven't moved for weeks.
Absolutely. Gathering dust,
Yes.
And so I say to everybody, your balance sheet under current assets, when you go and buy inventory, you are moving the money from the cash in the bank account side to that inventory. And when you don't account for it, you don't use it, because your role as a business owner is to turn the assets as fast as possible into sales. to give you back cash. And it is when you're in a crunch that Theo, you start to say, okay, let me look again. What am I supposed to be doing? Let me look at every single line. Okay, no emotion here now. It has to go, it has to go, it has to go. We have to focus. So very important. So, one of the things we have said is that smart people learn from their mistakes and wise people learn from the mistakes of others. What mistakes did you make, not just during COVID, but along your entire way of building your business 10 years ago? And how can other entrepreneurs learn from your experience?
What mistake? I would say taking our bookkeeping putting bookkeeping as a priority. While I must say we had an accountant, we have outsourced accountants before, still do. I've always gone to every workshop. Everything I've done has always been focused on sales and marketing. And if you don't understand your numbers fully, if you don't have them up to date, it makes no sense. I mean, you could be selling something that's putting you at a loss and selling it. You're trying to sell it to more persons, putting yourself even more at a loss. Not having accounting as first priority makes no sense. That I've learned it, I've adopted it slowly, but no doubt that should have been the very first. When I met you, I think sometime in 2013, 2012, I learned the accounting side, I learned the sales side, but from that very point, I should have put down all other focus and make sure that financially and all our financial information was like the highest standard possible. I should have been getting reports weekly from then. I mean, I learned from it and I don't regret it, but I definitely, if I went back, that would have been more of my priority. I focused on sales. I focused on marketing. I mean, if I did, maybe I would have had more reserves put down for the pandemic. So many things could have happened. So many things I said, but I don't really focus on that part. But more importantly, anyone else starting business right now or in business starting up, please, your financials should not wait until tax time.
Absolutely. And you must not be willing to not invest in a bookkeeping, in an accountant. Some people say, I don't want to pay the accountant this kind of money. And that's the problem. That's what I've seen over the years. We spend money on the marketing, on the car, on the this, on the that, on the furniture. It must look pretty. We must look good, the image. And then we don't want to pay the accountant. And it is the numbers in your business that tells you how you're doing. Because finish the sentence with me. The definition of a successful business is a commercial,
profitable
enterprise that runs without you. So that word profitable, you just said it, Theo. You focused on the marketing and the sales. But that gets you sales, which is revenues. But the business owner, you said you wish you had put away more. You wish you had focused on that. Because then you're not, instead of just focus, and now I know you're no longer just a revenue focused business owner. You're a profit focused business owner, which means, folks, for every dollar that you sell, how much of that will be left as profits? And what Theo learned was a concept of gross margins and net profit margin. It is in the margins that the profit is won. And therefore, you could be selling, as you said, all you want, and you're making a loss because you're not watching your margins. So very important. So if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, and by the way, markup, folks, is different from margin. Markup is how much your market cost up to selling price. Margin is how much of your selling price is left as profit. And that is what you need to manage. That's why you hear Theo saying, looking at my expenses, knowing every single line, because he knows that unless he makes profit, there is no saving. Without profits, there is no cash flow. And without any cash flow, eventually there will be no business. All right. So very, very good. So Theo, tell everybody, I'm going to put up back your information here, but let everybody know some of the things, how they can get in touch with you, etc.
All right. So, of course, first method, you can always give me a call at 876-408-5986. I'm also on WhatsApp, but of course, for ordering pretty much our menus, access most of our information, you can go to our website at ghcaterers.com. You'll find our online ordering for a family dinner special. You can request our corporate packages or wedding packages, or you can just fill out some information for us to provide you with a quote for your order. Of course, you can also email us at sales@ghcaterers.com, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at ghcaterers.
Awesome. So is there anything else you wanted to leave in terms of a final message for everyone here today that you would like to say?
I would definitely say get help. If you see an area where you're not your best, get help.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, folks, over the years, Theo has always been so, and he's not somebody who just seeks help, he also gives it. He has been a sponsor of many of our leverage nights. Oh, Theo, I wish we could play them again, but in this environment, we can't, And so, folks, I encourage you. His food is absolutely delicious. So get in touch with Theo. You have all the information going across the bottom here. And Theo, I really want to thank you so much for your courage. You have been that kind of business owner that I've seen. As I said, I watched you go through the challenges. I watched you pivot. I watched you try different things, testing and measuring, and you are now here. So I really want to say, Theo, you have survived and you are growing and you will continue to do so. So thank you very much for sharing with us this evening. And folks, remember, focus on your numbers. You need to know them. Your numbers are your friends. All right. So have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you again for our next episode.